The cameras flashed like a storm of judgment, freezing a single moment that would soon cost billions. His hand, strong, dark, open, reached across the table beneath the blinding glow of New York's skyline. Hers hovered for a heartbeat, then pulled back, slow and deliberate, like a door closing on something sacred. The room fell silent. Executives shifted. PR teams gasped. And in that breathless stillness, the billionaire's faint smile said everything. He'd seen this before. The world would call it business. But deep down, they both knew something far bigger had just broken. By nightfall, $2.4 billion would vanish, reputations would burn, and two strangers, bound by pride, pain, and fate, would learn that one refused handshake could change the meaning of power, forgiveness, and love forever. What's up, family? Welcome back to the channel. You're about to experience a story that hits hard, a story about pride, loss, and the kind of love that sneaks up when the world stops watching. Before we dive into the chaos, do me one favor, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Let's see just how far this story travels tonight. And if you're ready to feel every twist, heartbreak, and redemption in this tale, smash that like button right now. It tells YouTube you're one of the real ones who still believe stories can move hearts. Manhattan's skyline shimmered like glass fire in the morning sun, a reflection of ambition and everything that could be lost in a blink. Inside the top floor of Grant Industries, the city's hum was replaced by the quiet tension of preparation. Cameras were being set up. Suits were being straightened. Words were being rehearsed. This was the day the world would witness history, the merger of two of the biggest names in tech and finance. On one side stood Elias Grant, the man headlines called the reluctant billionaire. Self-made, sharp as winter steel, and with eyes that carried the weight of 100 closed doors he'd had to open himself. He was calm, his presence understated yet commanding. Decades of discrimination and disbelief had sculpted him into something rare, a man who didn't demand respect but commanded it quietly. Today, he was ready to lead his company into a merger that promised more than just profit, it promised legacy. Across the city, in a sleek marble office overlooking Central Park, Victoria Hale adjusted her pearl earring, her reflection flawless in the mirror. She had been trained for moments like this, polished, poised, invulnerable. Her morning coffee sat untouched, growing cold as she reviewed the notes on her tablet. CEO of Hale Technologies. Daughter of a father who believed emotions were weaknesses. Lover of control, master of survival. Her world was order, strategies, spreadsheets, and smiles that never reached her eyes. And today, she'd finally secured the deal that would elevate her company, and her name, beyond her late father's shadow. It's not just a handshake, her assistant whispered as they rode the elevator down to the lobby where cameras and investors awaited. It's history. Victoria gave a brief, distracted nod. Then let's make sure it's perfect. Back at Grant Industries, Elias stood by the panoramic window, watching the city pulse beneath him. The skyline was a promise and a warning, beautiful, merciless. He rubbed his thumb against his palm, an old habit from years when his hands built, not signed. They're ready downstairs, his assistant, Carla, said softly. Are you? Elias gave her a small smile. I've been ready my whole life. When the two worlds finally collided, it was in a ballroom wrapped in gold light, filled with cameras and whispers. The press conference began. Elias spoke first, his voice deep, resonant, sincere. This partnership represents not just innovation, but inclusion. Progress. The crowd clapped. Then Victoria took the stage beside him, elegance in motion. She was everything he wasn't, precise, polished, almost painfully perfect. The moment came. Flashbulbs erupted as Elias extended his hand. Every camera zoomed in. Victoria's eyes met his. For a fraction of a second, something flickered there, hesitation, discomfort, fear. Then she drew her hand back. We'll save the handshake for the contract signing, she said with a polite smile, turning back to the microphones. The air froze. The photographers stopped clicking. An awkward silence coiled through the room like smoke. Elias's expression didn't change, only his eyes. Calm, Knowing. Wounded. He nodded slowly and lowered his hand. Of course, he said simply, before stepping aside. It lasted 5 seconds. But those 5 seconds would burn through headlines, reputations, and bank accounts before the sun set. Hours later, every screen in the city was replaying it in slow motion. The clip. The refusal. The smile. Hashtags exploded. Talk shows debated. Some called her racist. Others called him manipulative. One clip. 1,000 interpretations. Elias said nothing. His silence was a storm all its own. Victoria's team scrambled. "We need to issue a statement," her PR director said, pacing. "Say your hand slipped, that you didn't see him eat anything." But Victoria's pride hardened. "I don't owe anyone an apology for how I choose to conduct myself in a meeting." "With all due respect," the director said, voice trembling, "you just refused the hand of one of the most respected black CEOs in America, on live television." Victoria's jaw tightened. "Then we'll clarify it tomorrow. Right now, I need silence." That night, Elias sat alone in his penthouse, city lights glinting like shattered glass below. His phone buzzed with calls he ignored. He poured himself a glass of bourbon and stared at the reflection in the window. A man who had clawed his way up from poverty, only to be reminded, again, that perception was a cage he'd never fully escape. He wasn't angry. He was tired. Tired of proving himself in rooms that pretended to be equal. His phone buzzed again, this time, a message from Carla. "Stocks dropping. Press going wild. Should we respond?" He typed back 2 words, "Do nothing." The next morning, Victoria's world began to shake. Her company's shares fell 6% by sunrise, 12 by noon. News outlets replayed the clip non-stop. She scrolled through endless comments, each one slicing deeper than the last. Racist witch. Power got to her head. Guess billions can't buy decency. By 3 p.m., Hale Technologies lost $2.4 billion in market value. "This can't be real," Victoria whispered, staring at the red numbers flashing on her screen. Her CFO's voice cracked through the chaos. "Investors are pulling out, some say it's ethics-related, others claim Grant Industries withdrew." "Grant," she repeated. No, Elias wouldn't, but her own doubt silenced her. Wouldn't he? After what she did. Across town, Elias was being asked the same question by reporters. "Did you orchestrate the collapse, Mr. Grant?" He smiled faintly, adjusting his cufflinks. No comment. But that smile, the same quiet, unreadable one from the conference, ignited speculation. Did he strike back? Was this revenge? By nightfall, Victoria's office was half empty. Her fiancé, Richard, called from London. "Babe, listen, just ride it out. Don't engage. Don't apologize. These things blow over." "It's not blowing over," she snapped. "It's burning down." "Then rebuild," he said coldly, before hanging up. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in her life, Victoria Hale didn't know what to do. She closed her laptop, leaned back in her chair, and let the tears she'd been holding finally fall. Not because of the headlines, or the loss, but because, deep down, she knew the truth. It wasn't the world that was punishing her. It was her conscience. The day ended as it began, in the glare of city lights. Elias looked out at Manhattan, his mind heavy. He didn't feel victorious. There was no satisfaction in another person's downfall. Only a hollow ache that whispered, you could have extended grace, and she might have learned. But maybe he wasn't ready either. Maybe he still carried too many ghosts of his own. That night, 2 souls on opposite ends of the city stared out their windows, one haunted by guilt, the other by disappointment, both unaware that fate wasn't done with them yet. Because sometimes, what breaks you is only the beginning of what remakes you. The morning sun rose over Manhattan, golden and indifferent, as headlines continued to roar. Handshake heard around the world. Refusal sparks billion-dollar fallout. Hale versus Grant, pride or prejudice. Victoria's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Sponsors were pulling out, investors were panicking, and her board was demanding answers. She sat at her desk, eyes hollow, coffee untouched. Her assistant stood near the door, hesitant. "Miss Hale, they want to know if you'll be issuing a statement." Victoria didn't look up. "If I speak now, I'll sound defensive. If I stay quiet, I'll look guilty. Either way, they'll eat me alive." "Maybe he'll issue one first," the assistant said quietly. "Mr. Grant." That name made her chest tighten. "He won't," Victoria whispered. "He's too composed." That's his power, silence. Across the city, Elias sat in a conference room surrounded by his legal team. They were advising him to take advantage of the chaos, to buy out Hale Technologies while their stock was low. "You could acquire them by next week," one lawyer said. "She humiliated you on live TV. The market's giving you your revenge on a silver platter." Elias leaned back, his gaze distant. "If I buy her company now, what message does that send?" "That you're a strategist," another said. "That you don't play soft." He smiled faintly. "I built my empire by being underestimated. I don't need vengeance. I need vision." The room fell silent. Elias stood, adjusting his tie, his presence quiet but commanding. "Let her breathe. She'll come to me." Back in her apartment, Victoria sat barefoot on the couch, the skyline outside shimmering like temptation. Her fiancé, Richard, arrived unannounced, his cologne strong, his expression sharper than usual. "You're trending for all the wrong reasons," he said flatly. "I noticed," she muttered. "This could ruin both of us. Our investors are panicking. My firm had money in your merger deal." She blinked. "Your firm?" "Yeah, Hale Tech was a safe bet until you decided to make a political statement." "It wasn't political," she snapped. "It was human." "Human doesn't pay dividends," he said coldly. "You need to fix this, Victoria." She laughed bitterly. "You mean fix myself?" "If the shoe fits," he said, grabbing his coat. "Call me when you remember what's at stake." The door slammed. She stared after him, her throat tight. In her reflection on the glass, she no longer looked powerful. She looked like a woman pretending not to be scared. Meanwhile, Elias's phone buzzed again, this time from an old friend, a journalist named Aisha. "You're everywhere, Eli," she said. "You planning to speak?" "No, you sure? The world's writing your story for you." He chuckled softly. "They always have. Still the stoic king, huh? Be careful. Silence can be a weapon or a wound." He paused. "Maybe both." When the call ended, he turned toward his office window. The city below looked smaller than ever. Later that night, Victoria finally did what she'd been avoiding all day. She watched the clip again. Frame by frame. She saw herself, composed, smiling, distant, and him, warm, open, genuine. The hesitation in her eyes wasn't arrogance, it was fear. Fear of being seen, of being vulnerable, of letting someone unfamiliar into her carefully curated world. She whispered, almost to herself, "Why couldn't I just take his hand?" The sound of her own voice startled her. She hadn't realized how lonely it sounded. Down in the financial district, Elias was doing the same, replaying the video, but with a different ache. Every time he extended his hand, he remembered all the moments in his life when he'd reached out only to be met with walls. He thought of his father, who once told him, "Son, when they won't shake your hand, build a table they can't ignore." He had done exactly that. Yet even here, even now, history repeated itself. Still, something about her hesitation had felt human. Not cruel, not mocking. Just broken. The next morning, as storm clouds gathered over Manhattan, their world shifted again. Victoria received an email from Elias's assistant, Mr. Grant would like to meet privately. No press. No lawyers. Her pulse raced. She reread it twice. Why would he want to see her now? Pity? Revenge? Or something else entirely? She hesitated, her finger hovering over reply. Pride whispered, ignore him. Conscience whispered louder, go. Finally, she typed one word, when? Across town, Elias stared at her reply and allowed himself the faintest smile. For the first time since that fateful handshake, the world seemed to pause. Outside, thunder rolled over the skyline like a warning, or maybe a beginning. Because what neither of them knew was that the storm they had started wasn't done yet. It was only gathering strength. And before it passed, it would strip away everything false and leave only the truth, raw, painful, and real. What would you have done in her place? Would you have shaken his hand, or let pride make the choice for you? Tell me in the comments, I'm curious how you see it. The rain came down hard over Manhattan, washing the glass towers in streaks of silver as if the city itself were trying to rinse away the scandal. Inside the private suite of the Langford Hotel, Victoria Hale stood before the mirror, her reflection pale under soft lighting. The world had turned her face into a meme overnight. The woman who refused. 3 words that now defined her career, her legacy, her name. She tightened her coat, masking the tremor in her hands. Tonight, she would face Elias Grant for the first time since the conference. Downstairs, Elias waited in the hotel lounge, black suit pressed to perfection, posture calm. He sipped his coffee slowly as reporters swarmed the streets outside, unaware he was here. To him, the meeting wasn't about revenge, it was about understanding. Because the truth was, despite everything, something about her refusal hadn't felt malicious. It had felt personal. And that, somehow, was more intriguing. When she entered, the air shifted. Her presence was sharp and fragile all at once. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then Elias broke the silence. You came. You asked, she said, forcing a faint smile. He gestured to the seat across from him. You lost 2.4 billion in a day. That takes talent. She blinked, unsure if he was teasing or condemning. I suppose congratulations are in order, she said quietly. You won. I didn't play, he replied. The market made its own judgment. Her jaw clenched. You think I'm racist, she said suddenly. The words dropped like lead between them. Elias leaned back, studying her face. I think you're human. Which means you have blind spots. So do I. You think this was a blind spot? I think it was a mirror. She looked away, stung by his calmness. You don't know me. No, he said softly, but I saw you. In that room, for 5 seconds, I saw something real. Fear. Pride. Maybe both. The waiter arrived with 2 glasses of water. Neither touched theirs. You could have destroyed me, she said. Bought out my company. Ended my career. Elias's lips curved into a subtle smile. I could have. But that's what everyone expected me to do. Then why didn't you? Because I don't make decisions to prove a point. I make them to make progress. She studied him, the weight of his words sinking in. Progress, she repeated softly. Funny how that word feels heavier when you've just lost everything. Maybe that's when it matters most, he said. When there's nothing left to hide behind. Silence settled again, not awkward but charged. For the first time, she noticed how steady his gaze was, firm but not cold. There was strength there, but also grace. It unsettled her in ways she couldn't name. If you didn't bring me here to humiliate me, she said, then why am I here? Elias leaned forward, his voice low, almost kind. Because the world's already decided who you are. I'd rather hear it from you. Her throat tightened. She wanted to explain, to tell him about the father who'd taught her never to show weakness, the boardroom battles where every gesture was calculated, every emotion a liability. But how could she? He wouldn't understand. Or maybe he'd understand too well. You think I refused your hand because of your skin, she said finally. That's what everyone thinks. But it wasn't that. It was instinct. Stupid, defensive instinct. You reached out, and I froze. Not because of who you are, but because of what that moment meant. Connection. And I've spent my whole life avoiding that. Elias watched her, his expression unreadable. That's an honest answer, he said finally. Thank you. That's it, she asked, half defensive. No lecture? No righteous anger. Anger is easy, he said quietly. Understanding costs more. She exhaled shakily, caught between shame and relief. You're not what I expected, she murmured. Neither are you, he replied, and for the first time, she smiled, barely, but it was there. Outside, thunder cracked, shaking the windows. The storm mirrored everything between them, charged, unpredictable, cleansing. I'll fix what happened, she said suddenly. The company, the PR, the fallout, I'll fix it. Elias nodded slowly. I believe you will. But fixing isn't the same as healing. She frowned. Healing? When something breaks publicly, he said, it doesn't just damage your image. It damages your peace. Don't confuse control with recovery. His words hit harder than she expected. She stared at him, speechless. In that moment, she saw something deeper. This man wasn't lecturing her, he was offering her grace she hadn't earned. And that was harder to accept than hate. Why are you being kind to me? She whispered. He smiled faintly. Because someone once wasn't kind to me when I needed it most. I know what that does to a person. She looked down, blinking back sudden tears. When she spoke, her voice was small. And what if I don't know how to accept kindness? Then start by not rejecting it, he said softly. The tension in the room shifted, no longer corporate, but human. Two people stripped of titles, left only with truth. The meeting ended quietly. No handshake this time, just a lingering moment where she almost extended her hand, then stopped herself again. But this time, he didn't seem disappointed. Just patient. As she turned to leave, he said her name for the first time. Victoria. She froze. Yes? You're not the villain the world's making you out to be. Just someone who forgot what real connection feels like. She swallowed hard. And you? What are you? He smiled. Someone who remembers. As the elevator doors closed behind her, she felt something shift inside, a small crack in the armor she'd worn her whole life. For the first time in years, she felt something dangerously close to vulnerability. Outside, the rain eased, leaving the streets gleaming like mirrors. And in those reflections, two powerful lives, both fractured, both searching, were about to collide again in ways neither expected. Do you think forgiveness should be given freely, or does someone have to earn it first? Drop your thoughts below. I really want to know how you see it. The next few days felt like walking through a storm that refused to pass. Every news outlet still replayed the handshake video, dissecting every frame, every micro-expression. Analysts debated intent, psychologists analyzed her posture, and social media turned their story into a battleground for opinions. But beneath the chaos, something far more subtle was happening. Elias Grant and Victoria Hale had both been shaken in ways the world couldn't see. Elias sat in his office overlooking the city, the afternoon light fractured by glass. His assistant, Carla, placed a folder on his desk. That's the latest financial report. Hale Tech is spiraling. They've lost nearly 20% of their staff. He didn't look at it. Let them rebuild. You could help them, she said softly. Offer a bailout. It would make you look compassionate. Elias glanced up, his eyes cool but thoughtful. You can't buy redemption with charity, Carla. Not hers. Not mine. Carla hesitated, then asked quietly, do you forgive her? He didn't answer. Because he didn't know. Across town, Victoria was sitting through what felt like her 100th damage control meeting. Her PR director droned on about image rehabilitation strategies, but the words barely registered. "We could start a diversity initiative," someone said. "Post a photo with community leaders. Maybe an apology video," another offered. Victoria's voice cut through the noise, cold and sharp. "I'm not turning my mistake into marketing." The room fell silent. No fake smiles. No crocodile tears. "I'll rebuild my company the hard way, or not at all." When the meeting ended, she stayed behind, staring out the window as the city pulsed below. For the first time, she realized she didn't know who she was without her power. She had built her identity around control, and now that it was slipping, she felt hollow. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Do you regret it?" No name. Just those 4 words. She typed back before she could stop herself. "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. "Someone who understands the cost of pride." She didn't have to ask again. She knew it was him. That night, Elias sat alone in his penthouse, staring at the skyline. He hadn't meant to text her, but something about the look in her eyes during their meeting kept replaying in his mind, fear and pride dancing behind glass. He had seen it before, in himself, in his own reflection after years of fighting to belong. Pride had protected him, but it had also cost him love, peace, and trust. Maybe he saw a version of himself in her, and that terrified him. Victoria read his message again and again, unsure what to feel. He wasn't taunting her. There was no judgment in his words, only truth. It unsettled her because truth always did. She typed a reply, then deleted it. Again. And again. Finally, she wrote, "What's the cost of forgiveness, then?" His response came minutes later, humility. And time. She stared at the screen, her heart tight. She wanted to hate him for his calmness, for the way he seemed untouched by all this. But deep down, she knew he was struggling too, just differently. Still, admitting that meant letting go of her defense, and she wasn't ready for that yet. The next day, she attended a board meeting. Her CFO spoke carefully. "Victoria, we're being advised to consider a merger buyout. It might be the only way to save the company." She froze. "You mean, sell to Grant Industries?" The CFO nodded. "It's just business." "It's humiliation," she said under her breath. "It's survival," he countered. That night, Victoria couldn't sleep. The rain outside tapped against her window like an echo of the past few weeks, persistent, unrelenting. Finally, she grabbed her keys and drove. No destination, just motion. She ended up outside Grant Tower. She parked, her hands trembling on the wheel, staring up at the illuminated building that bore his name. One man's empire, built on resilience. Her own, crumbling under pride. She didn't go inside. She couldn't. Instead, she sat there until dawn, watching the first light touch the skyline. Maybe it was time to stop running from her mistakes. Maybe it was time to face them. The next morning, Elias arrived at his office to find a sealed envelope on his desk. No sender name, just his. Inside was a single note in neat handwriting: "I'm ready to talk about rebuilding. Not business. Human rebuilding." He read it twice, then smiled, a small, almost invisible smile. That day, the world still debated their story, still mocked, still speculated. But in the quiet corners of 2 separate hearts, something unexpected was beginning to take shape. A truce. A possibility. Yet pride, even when cracked, doesn't die easily. The following week, Victoria made a bold public move, announcing that she would not apologize publicly, but would let her work speak for itself. The backlash was immediate. The internet exploded again. Commentators accused her of arrogance, of tone deafness. And through it all, Elias stayed silent, watching her from a distance. Carla found him one evening, leaning against the window, arms crossed. You're defending her in silence, aren't you? She asked softly. He didn't deny it. Why? Because everyone deserves one person who sees the story behind the mistake. Even if she doesn't want your help. Especially then. That same night, Victoria's phone buzzed again. You don't have to prove anything to them, Elias's message read. She typed back, then why does it feel like I do? His answer came minutes later, because you haven't forgiven yourself yet. She put her phone down, pressing her palms to her eyes as tears finally escaped. She didn't cry for the lost money or the ruined reputation. She cried because for the first time, someone had seen through her armor and didn't run. Be honest, have you ever pushed someone away just to protect yourself from being hurt? Tell me in the comments, I want to hear your truth. The universe has a strange sense of humor. After weeks of chaos, the story everyone thought was dying found new fuel when regulators announced a mandatory mediation between Grant Industries and Hale Technologies to address market manipulation concerns. Translation: Elias Grant and Victoria Hale would be locked in the same room until the government decided they'd resolved their differences. The irony was cruel. They were both furious, but for different reasons. She didn't want to face the man whose silence haunted her. He didn't want to stand across from the woman who'd forced him to remember every old scar he thought had faded. The mediation room was sleek, minimalist, and sterile. Glass walls, no distractions, no place to hide. The air hummed with tension. Victoria arrived first, sharp in a grey suit that matched her mood. She looked calm, but her hands trembled as she poured herself water. When Elias entered moments later, the energy shifted. He didn't have to speak, his presence filled the space. They nodded, curt, professional. The mediator, a woman in her 50s with kind but firm eyes, glanced between them. We'll keep this civil, she said, setting her files on the table. No press, no recording devices. Just two people trying to make peace before this gets uglier. Victoria's voice was cool. I'm not here for theatrics. I just want this over. Elias folded his arms. Then let's get to it. The first hour passed in silence. The mediator asked questions, they gave short, clipped answers. But underneath the corporate tone was something volcanic. Every glance, every pause was loaded with what they weren't saying. When the power suddenly flickered, plunging the building into half-darkness, the mediator sighed. Looks like the storm hit the main grid, she said. Backup generators should be online soon. Then she stepped out to make a call, and the door clicked shut. They were alone. For the first time in weeks, the air between them felt raw. No press, no cameras, no audience, just two people stripped of image. Victoria turned toward the window, the rain streaking down like tears. This is ridiculous, she muttered. Elias's voice was calm, but heavy. You're uncomfortable with silence, aren't you? She turned sharply. I'm uncomfortable being trapped with someone who thinks he's my therapist. He chuckled, low and soft. Trust me, I don't want that job. Then don't act like you know me. I don't, he said, stepping closer, but I'm starting to understand why you refused that handshake. Her breath caught. Oh? Do enlighten me. You weren't rejecting me, he said quietly. You were rejecting what I represented, control you didn't have, power you couldn't match. You've spent your life proving you're untouchable. And I reached for your hand at the one moment you couldn't afford to be human. His words landed like blows, not cruel, just true. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You think I wanted that moment? You think I wanted to become this? No, he said softly. I think you wanted to be safe. And somewhere along the way, safety started to look like distance. She stared at him, speechless. The storm outside rumbled like an echo of their tension. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Elias walked to the table, poured water into 2 glasses, and handed one to her. Truce, he said simply. She hesitated, then took it. Their fingers brushed, an electric jolt, brief but undeniable. You could have ruined me, she said after a pause. Why didn't you? Because I know what it's like to be publicly judged for a private mistake, he replied. And because revenge doesn't heal. It just repeats. Her eyes softened. You make it sound so easy. Just forgive and move on. It's not easy, he said. It's necessary. Thunder cracked. The lights flickered again. For a second, the only illumination was the glow from the city below, casting fractured reflections across the glass walls. You really believe people can change? She asked. He smiled faintly. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. The tension broke, not fully, but enough for her to sit down. Tell me something, she said, voice quieter now. Do you ever get tired of being the bigger person? Elias let out a soft laugh. Every day. But I've learned that peace costs less than pride. She exhaled slowly. I don't know how to do that, how to let go. You start by admitting you're holding on, he said. You don't have to be perfect to be forgiven. For a long while, they just sat there, the storm outside a steady drumbeat against the glass. The darkness wrapped around them, but for once, it didn't feel oppressive. It felt honest. When the lights finally flickered back on, the mediator returned, surprised to find them quiet, calm. She blinked. Did we make progress? Elias looked at Victoria. A little. The mediator smiled. That's more than most. As they left the building, the rain finally eased. Elias held the door for her. She hesitated, then nodded in thanks. A small gesture, but this time, she didn't avoid his hand when it brushed hers. Outside, the city gleamed wet and alive. They stood for a moment under the awning, neither ready to leave. You know, she said softly, I'm not sure what this is, truce, therapy, or something else, but it's the first time in weeks I don't feel like I'm suffocating. Elias smiled. Then maybe we're finally breathing the same air. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, she didn't see the billionaire. She saw the man, the patience in his eyes, the weight he carried quietly, the kindness he wore like armor. And she wondered if maybe, just maybe, the storm had brought her exactly where she needed to be. Be honest, do you think people who hurt each other can ever truly rebuild trust? Or once it's broken, is it gone forever? Let me know in the comments, I'm curious what you believe. The following week, Hale Technologies' downtown office was a shell of what it once was. Empty desks. Half-packed boxes. The air was thick with exhaustion and loss. But Victoria didn't run this time. She stayed, every morning at sunrise, every night long after her staff went home. She had decided, rebuilding wouldn't be about saving face anymore. It would be about rediscovering purpose. Still, something kept pulling her mind back to him, Elias. Their conversations had lingered in her chest like echoes that wouldn't fade. One afternoon, while clearing out her late father's old office files, she found a weathered photo tucked behind a certificate. It showed a young man in a pressed shirt, standing proudly beside her father at a university fundraiser. The caption read, Scholarship Recipient, Grant Foundation. Her breath caught. Grant Foundation. Her father's handwriting was on the back. He reminds me of what I used to believe in. She sat back slowly, her heart pounding. Elias had known her father. That night, she texted him, Did you ever meet a man named Richard Hale? His reply came seconds later, yes. He changed my life. They met the next morning in a quiet cafe, no press, no boardroom. Just two people, both haunted by the same ghost. Victoria placed the photo on the table. You were one of his scholarship students. Elias nodded. I was the first. He never told me, she said softly. He talked about his donors, his board, but never about you. Elias smiled faintly. He was complicated. Brilliant, but guarded. He didn't believe the world was fair, so he tried to make it a little less cruel. He paid my tuition when no one else would. He used to talk about the foundation, she said, eyes glassy. But I thought it was just a PR thing. I didn't know it was you. He believed in second chances, Elias said. Even for people who didn't think they deserved one. She stared at him, shaken. Then you must know he wasn't perfect. No one is, Elias said. But he gave me something I'd never had before, faith that I could belong somewhere. She smiled bitterly. Funny. He never gave that to me. Elias frowned. What do you mean? She looked down, her voice small. He was hard on me. Always said love made people weak. That emotions got in the way of power. I spent my whole life trying to be what he wanted, strong, unbreakable. And when you reached out that day, her voice broke. I heard his voice in my head telling me not to let anyone see weakness. Elias's expression softened, the pieces falling into place. So you didn't refuse me. You refused him. She blinked away tears, her composure unraveling. It doesn't matter now. He's gone. And I'm still making his mistakes. No, Elias said gently. You're just finally facing them. She laughed bitterly. You make it sound noble. It is, he said. It takes strength to break the patterns that raised you. The silence between them was heavy but healing. She reached across the table this time, not for a handshake, not for formality, but for connection. Her fingers trembled slightly as they brushed his hand. You said forgiveness costs humility, she whispered. Does it also cost pride? Elias met her gaze, eyes warm but steady. It costs everything pride's been protecting. She swallowed hard. Then maybe I'm ready to pay. That night, they walked together through the rain-soaked streets. The city glowed around them, soft, muted lights reflecting in puddles. They didn't talk about business, money, or power. They talked about loss, childhood, the invisible scars people hide beneath success. Elias told her about growing up on the South Side, about his mother working 2 jobs to keep him in school, about the day Richard Hale shook his hand and told him, make sure you hold the door open for the next kid. I did, Elias said quietly. Every scholarship I funded after that, every opportunity one created, it was because of that promise. Victoria stopped walking. And then I refused your hand, she whispered. He smiled faintly. You didn't close the door. You just forgot it was open. The words sank into her like light through cracked glass. They stopped by the East River, the wind soft against the water. For the first time, she let herself cry freely, no cameras, no audience, no control. And Elias didn't try to fix it. He just stood beside her, silent, steady. You know what I envy about you, she said after a long while. What's that? You know how to be kind without losing power. My father used to say the two couldn't coexist. Elias shook his head. Your father was wrong. Power without kindness is fear. And fear can't build anything that lasts. She looked at him, something fragile breaking open inside her. You're not what I expected, Elias Grant. Neither were you, he said softly. That night, as they parted, something had shifted, subtle but undeniable. The next chapter of their story wouldn't be about the scandal, or the billions lost. It would be about the wall slowly coming down. And though neither of them said it aloud, both understood something they hadn't before: forgiveness wasn't a transaction. It was a journey, and they were finally walking it together. What's harder for you, asking for forgiveness or giving it? Drop your answer below. Your honesty might just help someone else see themselves in this story. For the first time in months, Victoria woke up without dread tightening her chest. The sun filtered through her apartment windows, touching her face in gold, and for once, she didn't feel like hiding. She got dressed simply, jeans, a soft sweater, no armor, and drove to a part of the city she hadn't seen in years. Elias had invited her to visit one of his youth mentorship centers. If you want to rebuild something real, he'd said, start with people who still believe in second chances. The building wasn't polished like the offices she was used to, it was alive. Laughter echoed down hallways painted with murals. The scent of fresh paint and cafeteria food filled the air. Kids ran past her, holding art supplies and dreams too big for their small hands. For a woman who had spent her life surrounded by suits and silence, it was disorienting. Elias met her in the lobby, his sleeves rolled up, paint smudged on his wrist. "Didn't expect you to actually come," he said with a teasing smile. "I didn't expect to either," she admitted, scanning the room. "This place, it's different." "That's the point," he said. "It's where I come when I start thinking too much about money and forget what it's for." They walked through the center together. Every corner told a story: a computer lab named after a local teacher who had given free classes for decades, a library built from community donations, a wall covered with quotes about growth and grace. She stopped in front of one that read, "We rise by lifting others." "You really believe that?" she asked quietly. "Every day," he said. "The higher you climb, the lonelier it gets. Unless you're pulling someone else up with you." "Maybe that's why I've been so lonely," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "Maybe," he said softly. "But loneliness doesn't mean you're broken. Sometimes it just means you're waiting for the right company." She smiled faintly. "And you think I'm waiting for that?" "I think you've been waiting for someone to remind you that strength isn't the same as solitude." His voice was calm, gentle. She felt it settle somewhere deep, where her father's voice used to live, the part that always told her she had to fight alone. A group of teenagers called Elias over to help with a project, and for a while, she just watched him. The way he knelt beside them, not as a CEO but as a mentor. The way his laugh filled the room, easy and full. He looked at peace. And she realized she hadn't seen peace in years. One of the girls, maybe 15, approached Victoria shyly. "You're the lady from the news, right? The handshake thing?" The question stung, but Victoria nodded. "Yes," she said softly. The girl bit her lip, then smiled. "People online said you were mean. But you're here now. So maybe they're wrong." Victoria's throat tightened. "Maybe they are." The girl's smile widened. "Mr. Grant says people mess up all the time. What matters is what they do next." That moment cracked something open in her completely. She blinked away tears and looked across the room at Elias, who was watching her quietly, like he knew exactly what had just happened inside her. Later, they sat on the rooftop garden above the center, watching the city from afar. The sun was setting, warm, soft light spilling over everything. "When I started this place," Elias said, "I didn't have the money I do now. I just had a story I didn't want to repeat." "Your story?" He nodded. "I used to think success would make me free. But it just made me tired. I forgot why I started. These kids remind me." She looked at him, eyes full of quiet wonder. "And what reminds you when you're not here?" He smiled faintly. "People who challenge me to be better." She raised an eyebrow. "Like me?" "Exactly like you," he said. She laughed, shaking her head. "You're impossible." "And you're stubborn," he replied, smiling. "It's why you survived." There was a pause. The kind that wasn't empty but full of things unsaid, of emotions neither dared name yet. "Elias," she said finally, voice barely above a whisper, "if I could take that moment back, the handshake, I would. Not because of the cameras, not because of the money. But because it stopped me from seeing who you really are." He turned to her, eyes gentle. "Victoria, that moment didn't define you. What you do next does. And from where I'm sitting, you're already rewriting your story." For a moment, she couldn't speak. All she could do was look at him, the man the world called untouchable, sitting beside her with the kind of kindness she never thought she'd deserve. She leaned back, staring at the sunset. "You know," she said softly, "if someone had told me a month ago that I'd be sitting on a rooftop with the man I publicly humiliated, I'd have called them insane." He chuckled. "If someone told me I'd care about the woman who refused my hand, I'd have agreed." Their eyes met then, steady, unguarded, real. The city hummed below them, the world still loud, still unforgiving. But up here, in this small, fragile space, something sacred bloomed. She smiled, small but sure. You really think people can start over? Absolutely, he said. Some of the best stories start at rock bottom. Then maybe this is ours, she whispered. He didn't answer. He just reached out, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and this time, she didn't. Their hands met, warm and steady, no hesitation, no fear. And though neither said it aloud, both knew, this time, the handshake meant everything. Do you believe that sometimes the people we're meant to connect with are the ones we hurt first? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious how you see fate and forgiveness. For a few weeks, it almost felt like peace. The world had moved on to its next scandal, the media storm around them fading into distant noise. Elias and Victoria kept meeting quietly, no headlines, no photographers. Just long conversations that stretched late into the night, sometimes about business, sometimes about nothing at all. They started to laugh together. They started to trust each other. And for the first time in years, Victoria felt light, unburdened. She didn't know if it was friendship, forgiveness, or something deeper, but whatever it was the first thing in a long time that felt alive. Until the story came back. It started with a leak. A photo, taken by someone in the mentorship center, showed Elias and Victoria on the rooftop, hands intertwined, laughing like old friends. It hit every major news outlet within hours. From refusal to redemption? CEO Victoria Hale spotted cozy with billionaire Elias Grant. The headlines were merciless. Within a day, her board called an emergency meeting. This is reckless, her CFO snapped. You're risking the company's credibility. With all due respect, Victoria said calmly, our credibility was gone the moment I became a headline. At least now I'm trying to be human. Human doesn't pay the bills, another board member shot back. If you want to keep this company, distance yourself from him immediately. She didn't respond. Not right away. Because she knew they were wrong, but she also knew they had power to end everything she'd rebuilt. Across the city, Elias was facing his own storm. Investors were calling, journalists were speculating. She's using you, one advisor said bluntly. You're letting her tarnish your brand. Elias looked up from his desk, his expression sharp. She's not using me. She's rebuilding herself. At your expense, the advisor countered. You're not a savior, Elias. You're a headline waiting to happen. Elias dismissed him, but the words dug deep. He knew how fast the world turned. He'd built an empire on reputation, and now he was risking it for a woman who once couldn't even touch his hand. That night, Victoria called him. Her voice was quiet, tired. They're threatening to remove me as CEO. Let them, he said simply. It's not that easy. It is, he replied. You've already lost worse. You don't understand, she said sharply. You can afford to walk away from anything. I can't. I've spent my whole life proving I belong, and now, her voice broke. Now they're saying I'm weak because of you. Elias went still. Because of me. Don't twist it, she said quickly. It's not your fault. It's just, it is, though, he interrupted, voice low. Because I let this happen. I should have protected you from the fallout. I don't need your protection, she snapped. I need space. The words hung heavy in the air. He exhaled slowly. Space, he repeated. After everything we've shared. Don't make it sound like I'm abandoning you, she said. I can't breathe right now. Victoria, Elias, please, she whispered. Just, don't call me for a while. The line went dead. For the first time in years, Elias felt something he hadn't let himself feel, helplessness. He stared out the window, the city lights blurring into streaks of color. Pride whispered for him to let her go. But his heart refused. Across the city, Victoria sat on her bedroom floor, her phone still in her hand. She wanted to call him back, to tell him she didn't mean it. But she couldn't. Not when everything she'd fought for was slipping again. Tears rolled silently down her face as she whispered to the empty room, "Why does being strong always mean being alone?" Days passed. Then weeks. She buried herself in work, trying to silence the ache. But every corner of her life echoed with him. His words. His laughter. His calm. He had seen her when no one else dared to. And now she had pushed him away, just like she'd pushed everyone before. The headlines died down eventually, but the damage remained. She stood in her office one night, staring at her reflection in the glass. The woman looking back was powerful, but empty. The same emptiness her father had carried. And Elias? He withdrew too. He cancelled meetings, ignored calls, buried himself in work. His assistant noticed the change. "You're quieter," Carla said one evening. "You used to smile more." "Smiling doesn't fix what's broken," he said quietly. "Maybe not," she said, "but neither does silence." He didn't answer. Because deep down, he knew she was right. Then, one morning, a headline hit that shattered them both. Hale Technologies to be acquired by international conglomerate, Victoria Hale to step down as CEO. Elias froze, the words burning through his mind. She hadn't told him. She was walking away from everything, and from him. That evening, he drove to her building, rain pelting the windshield like shattered glass. He waited outside, but she never came down. He texted once, then again. "We need to talk." No reply. Inside, Victoria sat on the couch, phone in hand, eyes swollen from crying. She saw the message. She typed, deleted, then typed again. Finally, she wrote, "I'm sorry. I have to end this before it destroys us both." She hit send. Then turned off her phone. Elias read the message in silence. His jaw tightened. He closed his eyes. And for the first time since he was a boy, he prayed, not for success, not for control, but for peace. For her. The city lights flickered outside as thunder rolled over Manhattan. Two souls, once connected, now fractured, stood on opposite sides of the same storm, each wondering the same thing: was love always meant to hurt this much before it healed? Have you ever loved someone but had to walk away just to protect your peace? Tell me your truth in the comments. I want to know how you survived it. Dawn broke over the city like a sigh of relief after a sleepless night. It had been 3 months since Victoria Hale had walked away from Hale Technologies. 3 months since she'd sent that message that broke both of them. In the eyes of the world, she had vanished, a fallen executive retreating from scandal. But she hadn't vanished. She had changed. She spent her days volunteering at the mentorship center Elias had shown her, teaching young women how to navigate the world of business with empathy, not ego. She laughed more. She breathed deeper. She slept through the night for the first time in years. But still, sometimes, when the city lights dimmed and silence filled the space between thoughts, her mind found its way back to him. To the man who'd shown her what grace looked like. One afternoon, as she was leaving the center, she noticed a familiar car parked by the curb, a sleek black Tesla, tinted windows, engine humming softly. Her heart skipped. She knew it before the door even opened. Elias stepped out, looking exactly as she remembered, steady, composed, yet with a softness in his eyes she'd never seen before. She froze. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice trembling just slightly. "Maybe not," he said, walking closer, "but I couldn't stay away any longer." The air between them was thick with everything unsaid. "How did you even find me?" she asked, half smiling. "You're teaching at my center, Victoria. You really thought I wouldn't notice?" She laughed quietly, shaking her head. "I didn't think you'd care anymore." His voice softened. "That's the problem. I never stopped." Silence. The kind that feels like standing on the edge of something enormous. Elias, she started, but her throat closed around the words. You don't owe me an explanation, he said gently. I just needed to see you. To tell you that. I understand why you walked away. You were right to. You needed to find yourself. And you, she asked softly. Did you find what you were looking for? He smiled faintly. Peace. Eventually. But it didn't feel complete. Not without you. She looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought I was protecting you. You were protecting your fear, he said. And I was protecting my pride. We both lost. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve your forgiveness. You already have it, he said simply. That broke her. The tears came, soft and quiet. He stepped closer, hesitant at first, then sure, reaching out, not for a handshake this time, but to wipe away a tear that fell onto her cheek. Do you know what I realized while you were gone? He said, his voice steady but tender. You were never the woman who refused my hand. You were the woman who taught me to hold it differently, to lead with grace, not ego. She laughed through her tears. And you were never the man I thought you were. You were everything I didn't know I needed. He smiled. Then maybe we finally learned what that moment was really for. The wind blew softly, carrying the scent of rain and spring. Around them, the city hummed with life, horns, laughter, 1,000 untold stories. You know, she said, her voice gentle, if I had just shaken your hand that first day, we probably would have forgotten each other by now. Maybe, he said, but then we would have missed the lesson. And what lesson is that? She asked, meeting his gaze. That sometimes the mistake is the beginning of the miracle. For a long moment, they stood there in silence, the world moving around them. Then Elias extended his hand, just like he had that first day, months ago. This time, she didn't hesitate. She took it, fingers slipping naturally into his. Their hands fit perfectly, as if the universe had been waiting for this moment to make sense of everything that came before. So, she said softly, smiling through tears, what now? Now, he said, we build something new. Together. And as they walked side by side toward the future neither of them had planned but both had somehow earned, the city seemed to shine brighter. The world didn't care about their handshake anymore, but for them, it had become something sacred. Not power. Not control. Not redemption. But love. The kind that heals what pride once broke. Months later, the world would learn of their partnership, not just romantic, but purposeful. A new foundation, the Hale Grant Initiative, dedicated to rebuilding opportunities for those who had been overlooked or written off. When reporters asked about their story, Victoria would simply smile and say, sometimes you lose billions and find something priceless. And somewhere in the crowd, Elias would stand quietly, watching her speak with pride, not for her success, but for her peace. The past no longer haunted them. The scandal no longer defined them. Because in the end, what began with a refusal ended in reunion. What began with a mistake ended in love. What began with pride ended with grace. If you've ever lost something only to realize it led you to what you truly needed, tell me in the comments, what was your miracle mistake? And if this story moved you, don't forget to leave a like and share it. Someone out there might need to hear that second chances still exist.